welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Entertainment Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am happy to be with you. It's not Tuesday. You probably noticed that. We're going to talk about that in a second. As we get started, though, I do want to remind you, as always, to please like, follow, and subscribe to the show on whatever platform you happen to be watching it or listening to it on. That really does help the algorithm, so it gets the show out to more readers such as yourselves. Also, if you are interested in helping the network and this podcast in particular in another way, you can go to gsmcpodcast.info. You see that information next to me here. And there you can leave a tip or a donation. And if you would like to as well, you can leave a comment or a question. I'm happy to engage with anything that you want to throw at me. Hopefully, I'm happy to engage. But if you leave a comment or a question, I will I will answer that or engage with that comment at the beginning of the next episode after receiving said question or comment. Again, that link is gsmcpodcast.info if you want to support the podcast and the network as a whole in a different way. As always, all of your support, no matter what form it takes, is greatly appreciated. So, welcome to this episode. It's not Tuesday. I always bring you an author interview on Tuesdays. Sometimes if I have two booked in a week, I'll bring you an author interview on a Tuesday and a Friday. Last weekend, I had an author interview scheduled. I always have one scheduled every weekend. Sometimes two, like I said, depends on how things work out. And unfortunately, Nicole Lundgren, who was my guest scheduled for last week, had some issues that she was not able to make that interview. Perfectly understandable. These things happen. Wish her nothing but the best. So didn't have an interview last weekend, and then this past week was just crazy with work stuff in other ways. And I knew I wanted to do something this week, but here we are on Saturday, and I'm just now getting to this, so I apologize for the late episode this week. But I wanted to take some time because I haven't gotten to do a non-interview episode for a while, just for a lot of reasons. When I started this podcast 8 years ago, 8 years, it was as a book review, and then I was hoping to find some authors that I could interview and speak with, and that has really taken off. It's so much so that I'm not sure if I've said it or how often I've said it, and if I've said it, whether or not you've seen the episode where I've said it, but I currently schedule 8 months out. So let's say you are a publicist and you contact me with an author that you want to speak with. My next available interview time is the end of April. And so that is crazy. I try to only schedule one per weekend because that's really all my schedule allows for right now in terms of reading the books. I've got other things on my plate, and I do try to read every book for the authors that I speak with. So I do sometimes get double booked, and that's fine. I just make that work, and I do love fitting other people in there that way, but it does make it a little more complicated. You've also heard me say when I do any of my personal reading, it is usually on audiobook while I'm doing other things. So I read generally a digital copy of the author book for the week, and then in times when I am walking or doing work that I can listen to something else while I'm doing the work, then I'm listening to an audiobook. But I love books. I love reading books. I love listening to books. I love talking to authors about books. It's all wonderful, but I haven't done an episode for a long time where I just talk about the books that I have been, in this case, listening to for my personal TBR. Love the authors that I've met and the books that I've gotten to read for the podcast, but that's just a little bit different in terms of those are what I read each week. But I decided to do this episode for a couple of reasons. One, I can kind of back up and reintroduce myself and say, hi, I'm Sarah. I love to read. Daughter of a librarian. My dad was the K-12 librarian in my school. I went to a very small school in rural western Montana, graduated with a class of 40. We were a big class. The class before us was 25, and I went to kindergarten through 12th grade in one building. Kindergarten through 6th grade on one side of the cafeteria, and then in 7th grade I got to move to the other side of the cafeteria for 7th through 12th, so all one building. There was actually a second school in my hometown that had 3 grades in it. When I was in elementary school, that housed the junior high. It housed 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. When I was in 5th grade, my teachers, who were a married couple, Mr. and Mrs. Johnston, decided that they were going to move up to 6th grade. And there were many, many steps and stairs. It was the old schoolhouse that there was the other building just down the street from the building I was in. Many, many stairs, and Mr. Johnston was in a wheelchair. And so they moved. I don't think, this is how I remember it. I'm not sure that that's actually the reason that they moved 6th, 7th, and 8th grade up. I think that was just kind of how it worked. Maybe they moved up because the 6th grade moved and the 5th grade moved to that building. I could be remembering it wrong, you know how when you're a kid. At any rate, when I was in 5th grade, they decided to move 6th, 7th, and 8th from the other building. So I would have gone to the other building to the high school where I was, the elementary and high school, but onto the other side of the cafeteria. So I stayed in the same building the entire time, 13 years of education in one building. It was great. But at any rate, my dad was the K-12 librarian. Most of my life. He started out when I was in kindergarten. He was my music teacher. He was part-time music teacher, and then he was music teacher, then he was part-time music teacher, part-time librarian in the elementary. Then they combined the elementary and high school libraries, and so he moved also to the other side of the cafeteria where the high school library was. They combined the elementary, brought it over from the other side of the building and combined. So he was my librarian. My mom is an avid reader, always has been. She can read a book a day when things are going her way. You know, she loves to read. So that is great. It's just what she does. So I grew up loving to read, and books were a gift. We got books for birthdays and Christmas every year. In addition to, you know, we'd get toys and things as well, clothes sometimes, but there were always books for gifts. So I'm an avid reader. I've loved it always. And I thought I would reintroduce myself, which just makes me think of that TikTok song that all the Gen Xers are using. Doesn't matter. Yeah, so then when I started this podcast, I started just talking about books and the books that I loved, and that was fun. And then I started getting a few author interviews interspersed, and eventually that took off, and it has evolved to where it is. My very first author interview was a dear friend of mine. I knew her from college. We didn't go to college together, but we worked together 2 summers between college. She went to college in California. I went to college in Montana, but she was from Montana, and we worked together at a summer camp. And then she wrote books, and she was my very first guest, and she came on, and then she introduced me to a few authors, and those authors introduced me to a few authors, and then eventually I started developing some relationships with some publicists, and I have some really good relationships, and people send me those books, and here we are. I talk about, as you know, if you've been listening for the last couple of months, we've been talking about a lot of thrillers. Just finally, the last weekend's book was the 7th of a series of thrillers. 7 out of 9 weeks were thrillers. So if Nicole had come on, we would have talked about her book, A Man Downstairs, that was psychological thriller. And I, like I said, I'm sad that I didn't get to talk to Nicole, but completely understand her situation and why she wasn't able to join me for that. But I am going to talk about a book, well, a series of books when we come back, and we're going to take a quick break. This is going to be a quick episode today, but we're going to take one break, and then we're going to come back, and I want to talk about the Maisie Dobbs series. It's historical fiction. The author is Jacqueline Winspear. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Let's
go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work cause my boss is a jerk and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life cause I don't feel alive and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. Just a quick reminder that if you want to support the podcast and the entire network monetarily, you can go to gsmcpodcast.info, leave a tip or a donation, leave a question or a comment as well. Happy to engage with those. But again, that link, if you want to support the podcast in a different way, gsmcpodcast.info. You can leave a tip or a donation. Anything is always greatly appreciated. So, I mentioned before that I am talking about the Maisie Dobbs series by Jacqueline Winspear. And if you have been listening to this, but if you have been with the podcast from the beginning, you may know that I talked about the Maisie Dobbs series, my very first episode, maybe just the first book. I think I just started reading them at that point, and I love them. They are historical fiction. I'm going to give you the description of just the first book and then talk a little bit more about it. Give me just 1 second as I transition, give you some visuals while I read about the first book. I thought I had that page up. Clearly I didn't. Bear with me while I find that. Here we go. Okay, so book 1 is called just Maisie Dobbs. And it is, the description is as follows. Maisie Dobbs, psychologist and investigator, began her working life at the age of 13 as a servant in a Belgravia mansion, only to be discovered reading in the library by her employer, Lady Rowan Compton. Fearing dismissal, Maisie is shocked when she discovers that her thirst for education is to be supported by Lady Rowan and a family friend, Dr. Maurice Blanche. But the Great War intervenes in Maisie's plans, and soon after commencement of her studies at Girton College, Cambridge, Maisie enlists for nursing service overseas. Years later, in 1929, having apprenticed to the renowned Maurice Blanche, a man revered for his work with Scotland Yard, Maisie sets up her own business. Her first assignment, a seemingly tedious inquiry involving a case of suspected infidelity, takes her not only on the trail of a killer, but back to the war she had tried so hard to forget. And so that is just the beginning, the very beginning. There are 18 books in the series. You saw a lot of them in that slideshow. There was Jacqueline, a picture, or an author picture of her. So I don't even remember why I started, how I found this book. I mean, I love historical fiction, and so I don't remember if someone recommended this to me or if it was just a happy accident. I found it at the library or, looking through whatever I was looking through. I don't remember, but I read the first one and really liked it and have been reading ever since. Now, the reason that I bring this up again, A, because I love it, but also because I saw that there was a new one out, came out June 4th. I was so excited, a new one, yay. I get them on audiobook now because they're my personal reading. And so I went and I snagged it and I started looking at it, and it says a milestone. Oh, let me give you the words that broke my heart. It says, a milestone in historical mystery fiction as Maisie Dobbs takes her final bow. The last book is called The Comfort of Ghosts. The Comfort of Ghosts completes Jacqueline Winspear's series, and I was heartbroken. I should know this. I mean, I clearly was not paying attention. I was just waiting for the next one to come out. I hadn't really gone to Jacqueline Winspear's website or I guess I just wasn't paying attention, so I didn't realize that we were coming up on the end. And came out June 4th. I have not yet listened to book 18 because I don't want it to be over. But I thought, hey, since I'm going to be doing a quick episode this week, since I don't have an author interview for you, I want to talk about Maisie Dobbs. If you are a fan of historical fiction, this is World War II historical fiction, but it's also World War I historical fiction and the intervening periods. So you heard that Maisie goes to work for the Rowan family. She is working as a maid, a house servant, and she gets caught reading. She is very inquisitive, she's very bright, and of course this is in the 1910s somewhere, and she gets caught. She's afraid she's going to be dismissed because of course she should not be in the library reading, but Lady Rowan Compton is, did I say the Comptons or the Rowans? Anyway, Lady Rowan Compton, she goes to work for the Compton family. Lady Rowan hears about this, and instead of dismissing her, Lady Rowan is an advocate for women's rights and suffrage for women and everything. So she takes an interest in Maisie and has her friend Maurice Blanche start teaching and training Maisie in preparation for Maisie to then go to college. Well, as often happens in life and in, things happen to derail your plans, and in this case it was World War I. You heard that she started at Cambridge and then she enlisted as a nurse in World War I. That made a huge shift in her life. So the book starts in 1929, after World War I, by quite a bit, by over a decade, but we get a lot of the backstory. We get the backstory of Maisie. Maisie's mother is no longer living. She lives with her father, who is a very, very kind man, who also ends up at some point, I don't remember the exact timeline, but also ends up working for the Comptons. And Maisie's life has changed forever. She falls in love during the war with a young doctor. He is injured to the point that he is just, he's in an unresponsive state. He is in a facility and doesn't speak, he's just not really there at all, but he is still alive. So that's a complication in Maisie's relationship. They were engaged, but not public with that engagement, partly because of class and war and all sorts of other things. So Maisie's got this kind of complicated life. She's very, very shut down. She is a psychologist and investigator. Maurice has taught her all kinds of different ways of reading people and intuiting what is going on with them. He's a very unique mentor, very interesting. This is not the kind of investigating that you might be expecting, whether a man or a woman in 1929, but especially from a woman in this time period. It's very strange that she is a private investigator, and a psychic and private investigator. So she's got a lot of interesting things with her character, but she's very closed off. She is understandably, she's got a lot of trauma left over from the war. She's got a lot of trauma left over from this relationship that is now in limbo because he's still alive, but he is not there. She can't communicate with him. So she apprentices, she goes to school, she apprentices with Maurice, and then she opens her own, she begins to do investigations on her own, and that's where the book starts. And then these 18 books. The 18 books take us up through, I can't remember the exact year we're in. A couple books ago, it was Pearl Harbor. What was that? 1942. A significant event happened in her life on that day. It also happened to be Pearl Harbor. So those two dates combined. And then it's been a year or two. So you've gone from 1910-ish, depending on, I can't remember exactly when they start, but all the way up through the mid-40s. And I have loved this book these books so much, and to watch Maisie's growth, because she, as I said, is so very closed off. And there's other things that happen, that she has a lot of tragedy in her life, but to watch her character grow and see those stories, and just to watch her really blossom throughout the series, it's not easy. It takes a while. She has her ups and her downs, and it's crazy. But while I am so sad that this is the last book, and I will get to it, I will listen to it, but right now I'm just kind of holding on to that. I have it, I've got it. I don't want to finish it yet, but I will, because I must. I'll take the closure. But it's done so well. All of the characters really have had arcs that have carried you through, and you've gotten to see these characters, secondary characters, new characters that have been with you, that you've been reading for 18 books and for several decades, depending on when they came into the series. So Maisie's father has his own character arc. Maisie's assistant has a character arc. He and his family. There's a lot that happens there. Maisie has a dear friend, and she goes through. I mean, we're right in the middle of 2 huge world wars, and so nobody is without tragedy in their lives, and that comes into play a lot in this series. But we've come to a place where you can tell that things that I think it's good. I think that I would be happy if there were more books, but I understand why we're ending at this point in the series, and I think it's a good idea. I'm not eager to find out how we're going to wrap everything up, how Jacqueline's going to wrap everything up, but I am eager to find out how it's going to end and see just where Maisie's story takes her in this last book. But then I'm going to be sad, and I may have to go back and reread or re-listen to all of them, just because I'm going to miss them so much. Because, every year or two, I'd get a new Maisie Dobbs book, and it was something to look forward to. So closure is good, and closure also is sad. Transitions are always hard. But if you're a fan of historical fiction, whether World War II or World War I historical fiction, you get both. You get the intervening time, and that's also, I think, really interesting, because you see a lot of those steps that happen between World War I and World War II, and how things progressed, and where those tie-ins are through the eyes of Maisie and the other characters. But if you're a fan of historical fiction, if you're a fan of really interesting female characters, she's strong in so many ways. She's vulnerable in so many ways. She's had so much tragedy and loss in her life that she is working through, but she's human. Like, it's not a straight, that's why they call it an arc. But it's not even an arc. There's a lot of ups and downs and squiggles in that progression, just like life, right? She's a fictional character, but her character arc takes her through a lot of ups and downs and setbacks and everything, just like life for all of us. So I can't recommend this series enough if you're a fan of historical fiction. If you haven't started it, then you've got 18 books, and you can read them all at once and get the whole story and your closure all in one go. If you have started reading it, and I don't know, maybe you're like me, let me know if you've read them, if you love them. Let me know if you've read the last one. Don't tell me what happens though, but if you've read the last one and how you're feeling about the series being over, all of that. But this was fun. I'm going to try to do more of these, even if they're shorter episodes, just to talk about some of the things that I have been listening to and some of the books that I have been reading, and share with you. Today is my niece's birthday. She's 14 today. She's the one that has done 2 interviews with me. She wants to be a writer. She's an avid reader. So happy 14th birthday to Risa. Last weekend was my 14th dating and 12th wedding anniversary. So yeah, my husband and I went on our first date exactly 1 week before Risa was born. It's always easy to remember. So she's 14. Our relationship is 14. And it was so cool. They had the end of summer beach party on our anniversary. So I keep joking that our little village just threw us a huge party for our anniversary. Wasn't that sweet of them? But mainly to say that today is Risa's birthday, and happy birthday to Risa. And I'm so happy that she still loves books, and she still wants to write books, and she writes stories all the time. And at any rate, she and I talk about books. And so I want to talk more about books with all of you as well. So yeah, that is it for this episode. Did an author interview today, so we'll be going back to, I can guarantee that I have an author interview for you for this coming week. Let me bring that up. I spoke today with author Heather Freeze about her book, The Saddest Girl on the Beach. It does have a sad title. It could be, The Saddest Girl on the Beach could be a thriller, but it is not. We are moving into literary fiction this week with The Saddest Girl on the Beach. And I had a great conversation with Heather today. Really looking forward to sharing that interview with you next week. on Tuesday. So thank you so much for joining me for this episode. I will see you next week. Whatever's going on in your life right now, as always, I hope that you have plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thanks, and I'll talk to you next time.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn ain't that great. I don't wanna go to